The morning sun was just beginning to paint the sky with shades of orange and pink when Emma and Lily decided to take their golden retriever, Max, for an early walk. The 12-year-old twins had always been early risers, much to their mother's amazement. Their small town of Riverside was still quiet, with only the sound of birds chirping and the occasional car passing by on the main road. Emma adjusted her ponytail, while Lily clipped the leash onto Max's collar. The dog wagged his tail excitedly, knowing that their usual route would take them past the old wooden bridge that crossed Miller's Creek. It was their favorite spot because Max loved to watch the water flowing beneath the weathered planks, and the girls enjoyed sitting on the bridge's edge, dangling their feet and talking about everything from school to their dreams of becoming veterinarians one day. Their mother, Sarah, had kissed them goodbye at the door, reminding them to stay together and be back before breakfast. She trusted her daughters completely. They were responsible girls who never wandered too far and always kept their phones charged. Sarah watched from the kitchen window as the twins and Max disappeared down Maple Street, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. The walk started like any other. Emma and Lily chatted about their upcoming science project while Max trotted happily ahead, occasionally stopping to sniff at interesting scents along the sidewalk. They passed Mrs. Henderson's house where the elderly woman was already tending to her prize-winning roses. She waved at the girls with her gardening gloves and they waved back enthusiastically. Everything felt normal, peaceful and safe in their little corner of the world. As they approached the bridge, Max suddenly stopped in his tracks. His ears perked up and his whole body went rigid. The twins looked at each other with confusion. Max was usually so calm and predictable, but now he was behaving strangely. He began to whine, a sound they had rarely heard from him before. The dog pulled hard on the leash, nearly yanking it from Lily's hand as he started running toward the bridge. The girls followed quickly, their sneakers slapping against the pavement as they tried to keep up with their suddenly frantic dog. When they reached the bridge, they saw what had captured Max's attention, and their hearts immediately sank. There, lying motionless on the wooden planks about halfway across the bridge, was a man in a sheriff's uniform. Even from a distance, they could see the dark stains on his clothes that looked like blood. Emma grabbed her sister's arm, her voice shaking as she whispered that they should call for help. But before either of them could reach for their phones, Max had already pulled free from the leash and was running toward the fallen officer. The dog reached the man and began nudging him gently with his nose, whimpering with concern. The twins rushed forward, their fear temporarily forgotten as they focused on helping whoever this person was. As they got closer, Lily recognized the uniform and the badge. It was Sheriff Tom Morrison, a man everyone in Riverside knew and respected. He had been the town sheriff for almost 15 years and was beloved by everyone. He always had a kind word for the children, helped organize the annual town fair, and was known for his fairness and dedication to keeping their community safe. Seeing him like this, vulnerable and hurt, was shocking beyond words. Sheriff Morrison's eyes were closed, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Emma knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she checked for signs of life the way she had learned in the first aid class at school. She felt a weak pulse at his neck and noticed that he was still breathing, though each breath seemed to cause him pain. Lily was already dialing emergency services, her voice surprisingly steady as she explained their location and what they had found. While Lily spoke with the dispatcher, Emma tried to assess the sheriff's injuries. There was blood on his left side and his uniform was torn. She could see what looked like a nasty gash on his arm and another wound on his torso. Emma's mind raced through everything she had learned about emergency care. She knew she shouldn't move him, but she also knew that keeping him warm was important. She quickly pulled off her light jacket and placed it over his chest. Max continued to stay close to the sheriff, lying down beside him as if trying to provide comfort and warmth. The dog's behavior was remarkable. He seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, remaining calm and protective. Every few seconds, Max would gently lick the sheriff's hand, as if trying to let him know that help was near and he wasn't alone. The dispatcher told Lily to keep the line open and to make sure that someone stayed with the sheriff until the ambulance arrived. She estimated it would take about 8 to 10 minutes for emergency services to reach the bridge, given their rural location. Those minutes felt like hours to the twins. They kept talking to Sheriff Morrison, even though he didn't respond, telling him that help was coming and that he was going to be okay. Emma noticed tire tracks on the bridge and what looked like broken glass scattered near where the sheriff lay. It appeared that something terrible had happened here during the night. She wondered if there had been an accident, or if someone had hurt the sheriff deliberately. The thought that someone could have attacked such a good man made her feel sick to her stomach. But she pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the present moment. Lily kept her eyes on the road, watching desperately for any sign of the ambulance. The morning was getting brighter, and she could hear sounds of the town waking up in the distance. A few cars passed by on the main road, but none of them turned toward the bridge. She felt frustrated that help seemed to be taking so long, even though she knew it had only been a few minutes since she made the call. Sheriff Morrison suddenly stirred, his eyes fluttering open for just a moment. He looked at the two girls and the dog beside him, and his lips moved as if he was trying to say something. Emma leaned closer, straining to hear his words. His voice was barely a whisper, weak and strained, but she managed to make out a few words that sent chills down her spine. He said something about danger, about someone still being out there, but before he could finish, his eyes closed again and he went still. The twins looked at each other with wide, frightened eyes. What had the sheriff been trying to tell them? Was someone dangerous still nearby? Emma felt her heart pounding in her chest, but she refused to leave the injured man's side. Lily squeezed her sister's hand, and they made a silent promise to stay together and protect the sheriff until help arrived, no matter what. The sound of sirens finally pierced the morning air, growing louder with each passing second. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her as she saw the flashing red and blue lights of the ambulance turning onto the bridge road. Behind it came two police cars, their sirens also wailing urgently. Lily stood up and waved her arms frantically to make sure they saw exactly where they were. The ambulance screeched to a halt at the edge of the bridge, and two paramedics jumped out with their equipment. A woman with short dark hair and a man with a graying beard rushed toward them with a stretcher and medical bags. Right behind them came Deputy James Carter, Sheriff Morrison's second-in-command, and two other officers. The deputy's face went pale when he saw his boss lying on the bridge. The female paramedic, whose name tag read Chen, immediately knelt beside the sheriff and began checking his vital signs while her partner started setting up an IV line. She asked the twins quick, professional questions about how long he had been unconscious, whether he had spoken, and if they had moved him at all. Emma answered as clearly as she could, explaining everything they had done since finding him. Deputy Carter approached the girls with concern etched on his face. He was a tall man in his 40s with kind eyes that now looked worried and tired. He gently asked them to step back and give the paramedics room to work, but he also thanked them for their quick thinking and for staying with the sheriff. He explained that every second counted in situations like this, and their actions might have saved Sheriff Morrison's life. Max remained surprisingly calm throughout the chaos, staying close to the twins but watching the paramedics work with intelligent, alert eyes. The dog seemed to understand that these people were there to help. Deputy Carter noticed the dog and commented on how well behaved he was, especially given the stressful circumstances. Lily explained that Max was the one who had actually found the sheriff first, pulling them toward the bridge when he sensed something was wrong. The paramedics worked swiftly and efficiently, stabilizing Sheriff Morrison's condition. The male paramedic reported that the sheriff had sustained what appeared to be a gunshot wound to his side, along with several other injuries consistent with a physical altercation. This information made Deputy Carter's expression even more serious. He immediately radioed for additional units and requested that the state police be notified. A shooting involving a law enforcement officer was a major incident. While the paramedics prepared to transport Sheriff Morrison to the hospital, Deputy Carter asked the twins if they could tell him everything they had seen and heard. Emma recounted how Max had acted strangely as they approached the bridge, how they had found the sheriff lying unconscious, and the few words he had managed to say before losing consciousness again. When she mentioned that the sheriff had warned them about danger and someone still being out there, the deputy's face became even more grave. Deputy Carter immediately ordered the other officers to secure the area and search the surrounding woods and roadways. He told the twins that he would need them to come to the station later to give formal statements, but for now he wanted to make sure they got home safely. He asked if their parents knew where they were, and Lily quickly explained that their mother was expecting them home soon and would be worried if they didn't return. The paramedics carefully loaded Sheriff Morrison onto the stretcher and began wheeling him toward the ambulance. As they passed by the twins, paramedic Chen paused for a moment and told the girls that they had done an excellent job. She said that staying calm and calling for help immediately were exactly the right actions and that their quick response had given the sheriff a much better chance of survival. Her words made both Emma and Lily feel a little less shaken. Just as the ambulance doors were closing, Sheriff Morrison's hand moved slightly, and his eyes opened for a brief moment. He seemed to be looking directly at the twins and Max. His lips moved, and though no sound came out, both girls could have sworn he was trying to say thank you. Then the doors closed and the ambulance sped away with its sirens blaring, racing toward County General Hospital 30 miles away. Deputy Carter offered to drive the twins home personally. He said that their parents needed to know what had happened, and that he wanted to make sure they got home safely given the sheriff's warning about potential danger. The girls agreed, and they climbed into the back of his police car with Max between them. As they drove through the awakening town, people stopped to stare at the police car, wondering what was happening. The short drive to their house felt strange and surreal. Emma and Lily had never been in a police car before, even though they knew Deputy Carter well from his visits to their school for safety presentations. He tried to make conversation, asking them about school and their interests, clearly trying to help them calm down after the traumatic experience. But the twins could see in the rearview mirror that his mind was elsewhere, probably thinking about his injured boss and what might have happened. When they pulled up in front of their modest 2-story house, their mother was already standing on the front porch with a worried expression. She must have seen the police car coming down the street. Sarah rushed toward them as they got out of the vehicle, her eyes scanning them for any signs of injury. When she saw that they were physically unharmed, relief flooded her face, but confusion and concern quickly replaced it. Deputy Carter introduced himself and asked if they could speak inside. Sarah ushered everyone into their living room, her hands shaking slightly as she offered the deputy coffee, which he politely declined. The twins sat close together on the couch with Max at their feet, while Deputy Carter explained what had happened. He told Sarah how her daughters had discovered Sheriff Morrison critically injured on the bridge and how their quick actions had potentially saved his life. Sarah's face went through a range of emotions as she listened: shock, fear, pride, and worry all flickering across her features. She pulled both girls into a tight hug, telling them how proud she was of their bravery but also how scared she felt, knowing they had been in a potentially dangerous situation. She asked Deputy Carter if her daughters were in any danger, and his answer was honest but not entirely reassuring. The deputy explained that until they knew exactly what had happened to Sheriff Morrison and whether the person responsible had been apprehended, everyone needed to be cautious. He didn't want to alarm them unnecessarily, but given the sheriff's warning about someone still being out there, it was better to be safe. He suggested that the family stay home for the rest of the day and keep their doors locked. He promised to station a patrol car near their house as a precaution. Deputy Carter also mentioned that he would need the girls to come to the station later that afternoon to give detailed statements. These statements would be crucial to the investigation, as the twins were the first people to find the sheriff and might have seen or heard things that could help identify what happened. He assured Sarah that a child services specialist would be present during the interviews to make sure the process wasn't too stressful for the girls. Before leaving, Deputy Carter knelt down to Max's level and patted the dog's head. He told the twins that Max was a hero too, and that the dog's instincts and loyalty had played a crucial role in finding the sheriff before it was too late. Max wagged his tail slowly as if he understood the praise. The deputy promised to keep them updated on Sheriff Morrison's condition and asked them to call immediately if they remembered anything else or noticed anything unusual. After Deputy Carter left, Sarah made the twins hot chocolate despite the warm morning, saying that it always helped after a shock. She called their father, David, who worked at a construction site 2 towns over, and explained what had happened. Within minutes, he was on his way home, abandoning his work shift without a second thought. The family needed to be together after such a frightening experience. News of the incident spread through Riverside like wildfire. By mid-morning, nearly everyone in town had heard that Sheriff Morrison had been found badly injured on the old bridge, and that the Henderson twins and their dog had discovered him. The local radio station interrupted its regular programming to report the breaking news, and people began gathering in small groups on street corners in the diner, and at the grocery store to discuss what might have happened. Emma and Lily spent the morning at home with their mother, trying to process everything they had witnessed. Neither girl felt much like eating, despite their mother's gentle insistence that they have some breakfast. They sat together in the living room, Max curled up between them on the couch as if the dog knew they needed his comforting presence. The television was on, showing a news report about the incident, but Sarah quickly turned it off, deciding her daughters had seen enough for one day. Their father, David, arrived home just before noon, still wearing his work clothes and covered in construction dust. He didn't even pause to change before pulling his daughters into a fierce embrace. He was a quiet man who showed his emotions through actions rather than words, but now tears streamed down his weathered face as he held his girls close. He thanked God out loud that they were safe and told them how incredibly brave and smart they had been. The phone rang constantly throughout the morning. Friends, neighbors, and even distant relatives who had heard the news called to check on the twins and offer support. Mrs. Henderson from down the street brought over a casserole, saying that the family shouldn't have to worry about cooking during such a stressful time. Other neighbors followed with similar gestures. Mr. Patterson brought fresh bread from his bakery, and the Johnsons dropped off a basket of fruit and homemade cookies. Around 2 in the afternoon, Deputy Carter called to say he was ready to take the girls' statements. Sarah insisted on accompanying them to the station, and David said he would come too. The whole family, including Max, piled into their old sedan and drove to the small police station on Main Street. The building looked different than usual, with several state police vehicles parked outside and officers in different uniforms moving purposefully in and out of the entrance. Inside the station, the atmosphere was tense and busy. Officers were making phone calls, studying maps, and coordinating search efforts. Deputy Carter greeted the family personally and led them to a quiet conference room that had been set up specifically for interviewing the twins. True to his word, a woman named Dr. Patricia Flores was there, a child psychologist who specialized in working with young witnesses. She had a warm smile and immediately put the girls at ease. Dr. Flores explained that they would talk to each twin separately to make sure each girl could share her own observations without being influenced by what her sister might say. This was standard procedure and nothing to worry about. Sarah would be allowed to sit in on both interviews. Emma went first while Lily waited outside with their father and Max. The questions were gentle but thorough, and Dr. Flores made sure to check frequently that Emma was comfortable continuing. Emma recounted everything she could remember: the exact time they had left home, the route they took, how Max had behaved strangely near the bridge, finding the sheriff, the injuries she had observed, the words he had spoken, and every detail about the scene, including the tire tracks and broken glass she had noticed. Deputy Carter took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific details like the sheriff's exact words and whether Emma had seen or heard any vehicles or people in the area. When it was Lily's turn, she provided her own perspective on the same events. Her observations matched Emma's in most details, which Deputy Carter said was a good sign that both girls had clear, accurate memories of what happened. Lily also mentioned something Emma hadn't thought to include. She had noticed what looked like a piece of torn fabric caught on the bridge railing, dark blue or black in color, which might have been from someone's clothing. This new information excited Deputy Carter, who immediately radioed officers at the scene to search for the fabric. Finding physical evidence like that could be crucial to identifying what had happened and who might have been involved. He praised Lily for her sharp observation skills and told both girls that their detailed accounts were going to be extremely helpful to the investigation. Every little detail could potentially be the key to solving the case. After the interviews concluded, Deputy Carter asked the family to step into his office. He wanted to update them on Sheriff Morrison's condition and share what little they knew so far about the incident. The sheriff was in surgery at County General Hospital, and while his injuries were serious, the doctors were cautiously optimistic about his chances. The bullet had missed his vital organs, but he had lost a significant amount of blood and sustained other injuries from what appeared to be a physical fight. The deputy explained that investigators believe the incident had occurred sometime between midnight and 3 in the morning. A motorist had reported seeing what looked like 2 vehicles near the bridge around 1 a.m., but hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now that report took on new significance. The police were working to identify those vehicles and were reviewing security camera footage from businesses along the main road that led to the bridge. As for the sheriff's warning about danger, Deputy Carter said they were taking it very seriously. Additional officers had been brought in from neighboring counties, and state police were assisting with the investigation. They were operating under the assumption that whoever had attacked Sheriff Morrison might still be in the area. However, the deputy tried to reassure the family that there was no reason to believe the perpetrator had any interest in the twins or would target them in any way. Still, as a precaution, Deputy Carter said a patrol car would continue to monitor their neighborhood for the next several days. He also gave Sarah and David his personal cell phone number and told them to call immediately if anything seemed unusual or if the girls remembered any additional details. He emphasized that there was no such thing as a detail too small or unimportant when it came to an investigation like this. Before the family left the station, several officers approached the twins to thank them personally for their quick thinking and bravery. One older officer, Sergeant Williams, who had worked with Sheriff Morrison for over a decade, had tears in his eyes as he shook their hands. He told them that Tom Morrison was like a brother to him, and knowing that these two young girls had potentially saved his life meant more than words could express. The local newspaper editor, Mr. Brennan, was waiting outside the station when they emerged. He politely asked if the family would be willing to talk to him for a story. David firmly but politely declined, saying his daughters had been through enough for one day and needed time to rest and recover from their experience. Mr. Brennan nodded understandingly, but asked if they might reconsider in a few days, emphasizing that the community wanted to celebrate their heroism. On the drive home, the family was mostly quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Emma stared out the window at the familiar streets of Riverside, thinking about how different everything looked now, even though nothing physical had changed. The town was the same, but her perception of it had shifted. She had always thought of Riverside as a completely safe place where nothing bad ever happened. But now she knew that wasn't entirely true. Lily sat with her arm around Max, drawing comfort from the dog's steady presence. She kept thinking about Sheriff Morrison's face when he had briefly opened his eyes in the ambulance. He had looked so weak and vulnerable, nothing like the strong, confident man who always stood tall at town events and smiled at everyone he met. She found herself praying silently that he would survive and recover, something she hadn't done since she was very young. When they got home, Sarah suggested that the twins might want to rest, but neither girl felt tired despite the emotional exhaustion. Instead, they asked if they could call their best friend, Sophie Martinez, who lived 3 houses down. Sophie had texted them multiple times throughout the day, worried and wanting to know if they were okay. Sarah agreed, thinking that talking to a friend might help them process their feelings. Sophie came over within minutes, her eyes wide with concern and curiosity. The 3 girls went up to Emma and Lily's shared bedroom while the adults talked downstairs. Sophie listened with amazement as the twins recounted their morning adventure, interrupting occasionally with gasps of shock or questions. She told them that everyone at school was talking about it, and that their classmates were calling them heroes. The twins didn't feel much like heroes, though. They felt more confused and shaken than anything else. That evening, the family gathered around the dinner table, but none of them had much appetite. The casserole Mrs. Henderson had brought sat mostly untouched as they picked at their food and made small talk that felt forced and uncomfortable. The elephant in the room was obvious. They were all worried about Sheriff Morrison and anxious about what the investigation might uncover. The not knowing was almost worse than having answers, even if those answers might be disturbing. The local news at 6 o'clock led with the story, showing footage of the bridge cordoned off with yellow police tape and officers combing through the area looking for evidence. The news anchor reported that Sheriff Tom Morrison remained in critical but stable condition after emergency surgery. The broadcast also mentioned that 2 local girls and their dog had discovered the sheriff and likely saved his life. Though it didn't name Emma and Lily directly, respecting their privacy as minors, David turned off the television after the news ended. Deciding that they all needed a break from thinking about the incident, he suggested they play a board game, something they often did on quiet evenings. It was a transparent attempt to create normalcy, but everyone appreciated the effort. They chose Monopoly, and for a couple of hours the family was able to focus on something mundane and familiar, even managing a few genuine laughs along the way. That night, Emma had trouble sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sheriff Morrison lying on the bridge, his uniform stained with blood. She kept hearing his whispered warning about danger in her mind, wondering what he had meant and whether the person responsible had been caught. Around midnight, she heard movement in the house and discovered that Lily was also awake. Sitting at their bedroom window and staring out at the quiet street below, the twins talked in whispers for over an hour, sharing their fears and feelings about what they had witnessed. Lily admitted that she felt guilty for some reason, even though she knew logically that nothing that happened was their fault. Emma confessed that she felt angry at whoever had hurt the sheriff, an intensity of emotion she hadn't experienced before. Max, sensing their distress, padded over and rested his head on Emma's lap, his brown eyes full of understanding and sympathy. The next morning arrived with gray skies and light rain, matching the somber mood that had settled over Riverside. Sarah let the twins sleep in, but they both woke early anyway, their internal clocks and racing thoughts making extended sleep impossible. When they came downstairs, they found their father already up, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. The front page featured a large photograph of the bridge and a headline, "Sheriff Fighting for Life After Mysterious Attack." The article didn't contain much new information, but it did quote Deputy Carter saying that investigators were following several leads and expected to make significant progress soon. It also included brief quotes from community members expressing shock and support. Mayor Ellen Richardson was quoted saying that Sheriff Morrison was a pillar of the community and that the entire town was praying for his recovery. The article ended by mentioning the two brave young girls who found him, calling them local heroes. Around 10 that morning, Deputy Carter called with an update. Sheriff Morrison had survived the night, which doctors considered a very positive sign. He was still unconscious and on a ventilator, but his vital signs were improving. The deputy also shared that the investigation had made some progress. They had identified tire tracks at the scene belonging to a vehicle that was now being sought. He couldn't share more details, but he wanted the family to know that they were making headway. Sarah decided that staying cooped up in the house wasn't healthy for anyone, so she suggested they go to church. It was Thursday, not a regular service day, but the pastor had announced that the church would be open for anyone wanting to pray for Sheriff Morrison's recovery. When the family arrived at Riverside Community Church, they were surprised to find the parking lot nearly full. Clearly, many others had the same idea. Inside the peaceful sanctuary, people sat in pews or knelt in prayer, the atmosphere heavy with concern and hope. Emma and Lily sat with their parents, each lost in their own thoughts and prayers. The twins weren't particularly religious, but something about the quiet communal support felt comforting. They saw familiar faces throughout the church: teachers, shopkeepers, their pediatrician, and many others who made up the fabric of their small town. Pastor Michael approached the family after they had been there for about 30 minutes. He was a kind man in his 50s with a gentle manner that made people feel at ease. He told the twins that what they had done took tremendous courage and compassion, and that their actions embodied the best of what it meant to love your neighbor. His words were simple but sincere, and they made Emma feel like perhaps they really had done something important. When they left the church, Mrs. Henderson was waiting near their car. She had been inside praying as well and wanted to speak with the family. With tears in her eyes, she explained that Sheriff Morrison had helped her son many years ago when he had gotten into trouble with the law as a teenager. Instead of simply arresting him, the sheriff had taken time to mentor him, helping him turn his life around. Now her son was a successful teacher in another state. She wanted the twins to know they had saved a truly good man. That afternoon, while the twins were in their room reading, Sarah received a phone call that made her cry happy tears. It was a nurse from County General Hospital saying that Sheriff Morrison had regained consciousness and was asking about the girls who had found him. He wanted the family to know how grateful he was and hoped to thank them in person once he recovered enough to have visitors. The news lifted everyone's spirits immensely. Over the next several days, life began to slowly return to a semblance of normalcy, though the incident remained at the forefront of everyone's minds. The twins returned to school on Monday, where they were greeted like celebrities. Classmates surrounded them with questions, and even teachers who normally maintained professional distance expressed their admiration. Emma and Lily found the attention both flattering and overwhelming, not quite knowing how to handle their newfound status. Their story had spread beyond Riverside. Regional news stations picked it up, and a few even sent reporters to interview the family. David and Sarah carefully controlled these interactions, agreeing to only 2 interviews and insisting that the focus remain on Sheriff Morrison's condition rather than sensationalizing their daughter's role. They wanted the twins to understand that they had done the right thing without turning them into media spectacles. The investigation continued to develop. Deputy Carter kept the family informed as much as he could without compromising the case. They learned that Sheriff Morrison had been investigating a drug trafficking operation that extended through several rural counties. On the night of the attack, he had apparently received a tip about suspicious activity near the bridge and had gone to check it out alone, which was against protocol but typical of his hands-on approach to law enforcement. According to the emerging picture, the sheriff had interrupted a drug deal in progress. There had been a confrontation, shots were fired, and the suspects had fled the scene, leaving Sheriff Morrison for dead. The fact that the twins had found him just a few hours later had made all the difference. If he had lain there until morning commuters discovered him, it would have been too late. The medical team confirmed that he would not have survived another hour without treatment. The piece of fabric Lily had noticed turned out to be a crucial clue. Analysis showed it came from a specific type of jacket, and combined with the tire tracks and other evidence, investigators were able to identify 2 suspects. Within a week of the incident, both men were apprehended in a neighboring state. They were career criminals with extensive records, and evidence linking them to the attack was strong. The community breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing these dangerous individuals were in custody. Throughout this period, Max continued to be his usual loyal self, though Emma and Lily noticed he seemed to stay closer to them than before, as if he understood they had been through something difficult and wanted to provide extra comfort. The local veterinarian, Dr. Susan Palmer, heard about Max's role in finding the sheriff and offered the dog a free checkup and a year's worth of free care as a thank you for his service to the community. 2 weeks after the incident, Sheriff Morrison was finally well enough to have visitors beyond immediate family. Deputy Carter arranged for Emma, Lily, and their parents to visit him at the hospital. The twins were nervous about seeing him again, not knowing what to expect. They had only seen him injured and barely conscious, and while they knew he was recovering, they couldn't quite shake the image of him lying helpless on the bridge. The drive to County General Hospital took about 45 minutes, and the twins spent most of it in nervous silence. Sarah kept glancing back at them from the front seat, offering reassuring smiles. David focused on the road but occasionally reached over to squeeze his wife's hand. They all understood that this visit was important, not just for the sheriff but for Emma and Lily's emotional healing as well. Seeing him recovering would help replace the traumatic image of finding him injured. The hospital was much larger than the twins had expected, a sprawling modern building that served several counties. At the main desk, a friendly receptionist directed them to the 3rd floor where Sheriff Morrison was being treated. As they rode the elevator up, Emma felt her heart racing. She wondered what she would say to him, whether he would even remember seeing them on the bridge, and if talking about that morning would bring back frightening memories. Deputy Carter was waiting for them outside the sheriff's room, along with the sheriff's wife, Margaret Morrison, whom the twins had met several times at community events. Mrs. Morrison was a petite woman with silver-streaked hair and warm hazel eyes that were now red-rimmed from crying, though she wore a genuine smile. She embraced each of the twins in turn, holding them tightly and thanking them through tears for saving her husband's life. Mrs. Morrison explained that Tom had good days and difficult days, but today was one of his better days, and he had been looking forward to this visit all week. She warned them that he still looked quite weak and was connected to various monitors and an IV, but his spirits were good and his mind was clear. She wanted to prepare them so they wouldn't be shocked by his appearance, understanding that seeing him in a hospital bed might be difficult for young girls. When they entered the room, Sheriff Morrison was propped up in bed with several pillows supporting him. He looked much thinner than the twins remembered, and there was a grayish pallor to his skin that spoke of serious illness. But his eyes lit up when he saw them, and a warm smile spread across his face. He extended a hand, though the movement seemed to cost him effort, and both Emma and Lily approached the bed to gently shake it. The sheriff's voice was weak but filled with emotion as he thanked them for what they had done. He told them that the doctors had explained how the timeline of events had saved his life, and that if they had taken their walk even an hour later, he wouldn't have survived. He called them his guardian angels and said that he owed them a debt he could never fully repay. His words were simple but sincere, and both twins found themselves crying quietly as he spoke. Sheriff Morrison also wanted to hear about Max, asking detailed questions about the dog who had apparently been the first to sense something was wrong. When the twins described how Max had found him and stayed by his side, offering comfort, the sheriff's eyes filled with tears. He said he had vague memories of feeling the dog's warmth and hearing soft whimpering, and those sensations had somehow given him hope that help would come. Emma gathered her courage and asked the question that had been bothering her since that morning. What had he been trying to tell them about danger? The sheriff's expression became more serious, and he glanced at Deputy Carter before answering. He explained that in his confused state, he had been worried that the men who attacked him might return to the scene or that the twins might be in danger by being there. He was relieved to learn that they had stayed safe and that the suspects had been caught. The visit lasted about 30 minutes, and by the end, Sheriff Morrison was visibly tired. Mrs. Morrison gently suggested they let him rest. But before they left, the sheriff had one more thing to say. He told the twins that their actions that morning showed tremendous character and courage, qualities that would serve them well throughout their lives. He said the world needed more people like them, individuals who didn't turn away from difficult situations but instead stepped forward to help. As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Morrison reached into the drawer of his bedside table with his wife's help and pulled out 2 small boxes. Inside each was a deputy's badge, honorary ones that he had arranged to have made specifically for Emma and Lily. He said these badges represented the courage and service they had shown to their community, and he hoped they would keep them as reminders that they had made a real difference in someone's life. The twins were speechless as they held the shiny badges, turning them over in their hands and reading the inscription on the back that said, "For courage and compassion." It was one of the most meaningful gifts they had ever received, far more valuable than anything money could buy. They thanked the sheriff repeatedly, promising to treasure the badges always. Mrs. Morrison took photos of the girls with the sheriff, capturing the moment for everyone to remember. Walking back through the hospital corridors, the twins felt lighter somehow, as if a weight they hadn't fully recognized had been lifted from their shoulders. Seeing Sheriff Morrison awake and talking, knowing he was going to recover, helped them finally accept that everything was going to be okay. The nightmares that had been plaguing both girls began to fade after that visit, replaced by a quiet sense of pride in what they had accomplished. The drive home was much more cheerful than the drive there. David stopped at an ice cream shop, declaring that the occasion called for a celebration. As they sat in a booth eating sundaes, the family talked and laughed together, the tension that had permeated their home for 2 weeks finally beginning to dissipate. Sarah mentioned that she had never been more proud of her daughters, and David nodded in agreement, his eyes misty with emotion. When they arrived home, they found their front porch decorated with balloons and a large banner that read, "Welcome Home Heroes." Neighbors had apparently organized a surprise while they were at the hospital. Mrs. Henderson, Sophie's family, and several other neighbors were gathered in their yard with food and drinks, ready to celebrate the twins' bravery. The impromptu party lasted well into the evening, filled with laughter, stories, and genuine community warmth. Over the following weeks, life in Riverside gradually returned to normal, though everything felt subtly different. The twins found that their experience had changed them in ways both obvious and subtle. They felt older somehow, more aware of the fragility of life and the importance of quick action in emergencies. Their friendship with Sophie deepened as she helped them process their feelings, and their bond with Max grew even stronger. The school principal invited Emma and Lily to speak at an assembly about their experience and the importance of emergency preparedness. Standing before their fellow students and teachers, the twins shared their story and emphasized that anyone could be a hero if they kept calm, acted quickly, and sought help when needed. They also credited Max, bringing the dog to the assembly where he received enthusiastic applause and many ear scratches from admiring students. Local organizations began reaching out to recognize the twins' actions. The regional Red Cross chapter presented them with Youth Hero Awards at a special ceremony. The state governor sent a personal letter of commendation. The mayor declared a Community Heroes Day and presented the girls with a key to the city at a ceremony held on the very bridge where they had found Sheriff Morrison, now cleaned and bearing a small plaque commemorating the event. Emma and Lily handled the attention with grace and humility, always deflecting some of the praise to Max and emphasizing that they had simply done what anyone should do when encountering someone in need. They became advocates for basic first aid training, leading to the school district implementing mandatory first aid classes for all middle school students. Their impact rippled outward in ways they never anticipated. Deputy Carter visited the family regularly during this time, keeping them updated on the legal proceedings against the two men who had attacked Sheriff Morrison. Both suspects had been charged with attempted murder of a law enforcement officer, among other serious charges. The evidence was overwhelming, and prosecutors expected strong convictions. Knowing that justice was being served brought closure to the whole frightening experience. Max, for his part, became something of a local celebrity himself. The town council passed a resolution honoring him as an honorary K-9 officer, and the police department gave him a special collar with a badge attached. Children at school constantly asked to pet him, and he handled the attention with his usual patient, gentle demeanor. The veterinarian, Dr. Palmer, wrote an article for a pet magazine about animal intuition and how Max's behavior exemplified the special bond between dogs and humans. About 6 weeks after the incident, Sheriff Morrison was released from the hospital to continue his recovery at home. The community organized a welcome home parade, with fire trucks, police cars, and dozens of decorated vehicles driving past his house. Emma, Lily, and Max rode in a convertible just behind the sheriff's car, waving to the crowds lining the streets. It was a celebration not just of one man's survival, but of community resilience and connection. The sheriff's recovery would take many more months, and doctors said he would never be able to return to active duty in the same capacity. But Tom Morrison was determined to continue serving his community in whatever way he could. He began speaking about his experience at Law E. 3 months after that fateful morning, Emma and Lily found themselves sitting in a television studio in the state capitol. A major national news program had reached out wanting to feature their story as part of a series on everyday heroes. After much family discussion, David and Sarah had agreed to the interview, believing it might inspire others while also bringing positive attention to their small town of Riverside. The studio was intimidating with its bright lights, multiple cameras, and bustling crew members adjusting equipment and checking sound levels. The twins wore matching blue dresses their mother had bought specially for the occasion, and Max sat between them, wearing a bow tie that made him look distinguished and slightly uncomfortable. The show's host, a well-known journalist named Rebecca Chan, had a reputation for putting people at ease, and she spent several minutes chatting with the girls before filming began. When the cameras started rolling, Rebecca asked thoughtful questions that allowed Emma and Lily to tell their story in their own words. They described the ordinary morning walk that turned extraordinary, Max's unusual behavior that alerted them to danger, finding Sheriff Morrison, and their decision to stay with him until help arrived. Rebecca listened intently, occasionally asking follow-up questions that drew out details the twins hadn't thought to mention before. The interview also featured a remote segment with Sheriff Morrison, who was continuing his recovery at home. He appeared on a large screen in the studio, looking much healthier than he had during the hospital visit, though still noticeably thinner and moving carefully. He spoke eloquently about the twins' quick thinking and compassion, crediting them with giving him a second chance at life. His voice cracked with emotion as he described what it meant to him and his family. Rebecca then surprised everyone by announcing that a national pet food company had been so moved by Max's story that they were donating a year's supply of premium dog food and $1,000 to the local animal shelter in Max's name. Additionally, they were creating a Max Award to honor heroic dogs across the country each year. The twins were thrilled, and Max wagged his tail enthusiastically, perhaps sensing the positive energy in the room, even if he didn't understand the specifics. The segment aired 2 weeks later on a Sunday evening, reaching millions of viewers across the country. The response was overwhelming. The family's phone rang constantly, and their email inbox overflowed with messages from people sharing their own stories of heroism or simply offering congratulations and support. Several publishers reached out expressing interest in turning their story into a children's book, which the family was seriously considering. Local businesses in Riverside experienced an unexpected tourism boost as people from surrounding areas drove through town hoping to see the famous bridge and perhaps catch a glimpse of the heroic twins and their dog. The town council quickly recognized the opportunity and worked with local merchants to create a small visitor center with information about the incident and Riverside's history. What could have been tragedy had somehow transformed into an economic opportunity. Emma and Lily's social studies teacher, Mr. Thompson, approached them with an interesting proposal. He wanted them to create a presentation for younger students about emergency preparedness and the importance of staying calm in crisis situations. The twins agreed enthusiastically, seeing it as an opportunity to share practical knowledge that might help others. They spent several weeks preparing, creating colorful posters and practicing their delivery. Their first presentation was to a group of fourth graders at Riverside Elementary School, the same school the twins had attended just a few years earlier. The younger children listened with rapt attention as Emma explained the importance of knowing emergency numbers and always carrying a charged phone. Lily demonstrated basic first aid techniques using a mannequin borrowed from the school nurse. Max demonstrated his skills by sitting patiently and following commands, showing the children how well-trained dogs could be helpful in emergencies. The presentation was such a success that other schools in the county requested it. Soon, Emma and Lily found themselves traveling to different towns on weekends, sharing their story and teaching emergency basics. They discovered a passion for public speaking and education they hadn't known they possessed. Sarah and David supported these activities while making sure their daughters didn't become overwhelmed and still had time for normal childhood activities. At home, life had settled into a new rhythm. The constant media attention had faded to occasional follow-up stories, and while people in town still recognized and praised the twins, the intense scrutiny had diminished. This was a relief to everyone as the family valued their privacy and normal routines. Dinner table conversations returned to typical topics like homework, upcoming school events, and weekend plans. However, the experience had left lasting changes in the family dynamics. David and Sarah noticed that their daughters seemed more mature and confident than before. Emma spoke up more in class and took on leadership roles she might have shied away from previously. Lily became more observant and detail-oriented, often noticing things others missed. Both girls had developed a deeper sense of empathy and social responsibility that showed in their daily interactions. The twins also formed a special bond with the Morrison family. Mrs. Morrison invited them over for dinner regularly, and they developed a genuine friendship that transcended the circumstances of their initial connection. Sheriff Morrison became something of a mentor to the girls, sharing stories from his career and offering advice about handling challenges with integrity and courage. These visits became cherished weekly traditions. One Saturday afternoon, about 5 months after the incident, Sheriff Morrison invited the twins and their parents to his house for what he called a special announcement. When they arrived, they found Deputy Carter, several other officers, and Mayor Richardson already there. The sheriff, walking with only a slight limp now, greeted them warmly and led everyone to his backyard where chairs had been set up. Sheriff Morrison explained that his recovery had gone better than doctors expected, and while he couldn't return to active patrol duty, he had accepted a new position as the department's community liaison and youth programs director. In this role, he would work to strengthen relationships between law enforcement and young people, develop safety education programs, and mentor at-risk youth. He said this new direction had been inspired partly by his own experience and partly by watching Emma and Lily's dedication to helping others. But that wasn't the main announcement. The sheriff revealed that he and several community leaders had established a scholarship fund in Emma and Lily's names. The fund would provide financial assistance to local students pursuing careers in emergency services, healthcare, or public service. The initial funding came from donations that had poured in from across the country after their story went national, money that people had sent specifically wanting to honor the twins' heroism. Emma and Lily were speechless. They had never imagined that their actions that morning would lead to something like this, something that would help other young people for years to come. The scholarship fund felt like their story coming full circle, transforming a traumatic incident into lasting positive change. Sarah dabbed at her eyes with a tissue while David put his arms around his daughters, his chest swelling with pride. Mayor Richardson spoke next, explaining that the first scholarships would be awarded at a ceremony during the upcoming Riverside Community Day Festival. She asked if Emma and Lily would be willing to help select the recipients and present the awards. The twins agreed immediately, honored to be part of such a meaningful program. They understood that the scholarship represented more than financial aid. It symbolized hope and the power of ordinary people to make extraordinary differences. As the gathering concluded and people mingled over refreshments, Emma found a quiet moment to stand at the edge of the yard with Max. Looking out over the peaceful neighborhood, she reflected on how much had changed since that early morning walk. They had set out expecting an ordinary day and instead had their lives transformed. She had learned that heroism wasn't about seeking glory but about responding to need when confronted with it. Lily joined her sister, and the two stood in comfortable silence for a few moments. Finally, Lily spoke, saying she had been thinking about their future. She wondered if this experience might influence what they chose to do with their lives. Emma nodded thoughtfully, admitting she had been having similar thoughts. Maybe they would pursue careers in medicine or law enforcement or some other field where they could help people. The possibilities felt endless and exciting. That evening, back at home, the family gathered in the living room as had become their habit. Max sprawled on the floor between the couch and the fireplace, contentedly exhausted from all the attention he had received. Sarah brought out photo albums and they looked through pictures from recent months. The hospital visit, the various awards ceremonies, the television interview, and candid shots of daily life that showed how things had slowly returned to normal. A year had passed since that transformative morning on the bridge, and Riverside was preparing for its annual Community Day Festival. This year's event had special significance because it would feature the first presentation of the Emma and Lily Henderson Scholarship for Service. The festival committee had organized a grand ceremony, and the entire town was buzzing with anticipation. The festival had always been popular, but this year's attendance promised to break all previous records. Emma and Lily, now 13 years old, had spent considerable time reviewing scholarship applications with Sheriff Morrison and a committee of community leaders. They read essays from local high school seniors describing their dreams of serving others and their plans for making a difference. Choosing the recipients had been difficult because so many applicants demonstrated genuine passion and potential. Eventually, they selected 3 winners who would each receive financial support for their first year of college or vocational training. The morning of Community Day dawned bright and clear, with perfect weather that seemed to bless the occasion. Main Street had been closed to traffic and transformed into a festive corridor of booths, food vendors, and activity stations. The smell of funnel cakes and barbecue filled the air. Children's laughter echoed between buildings, and a local band played upbeat music on a stage near the town square. Red, white, and blue decorations hung from every lamppost and storefront. Emma and Lily walked through the festival with their parents and Max, stopping to chat with neighbors and friends. The dog wore his honorary K-9 officer collar, and people constantly stopped to pet him and thank the twins again for their heroism. The repetitive gratitude had initially made them uncomfortable, but they had learned to accept it graciously, understanding that people needed to express their appreciation. Sophie Martinez and several other friends joined them, and the group of teenagers explored the festival together. They tried their luck at carnival games, sampled various treats, and took silly photos in a booth with props. For a while, Emma and Lily could just be normal kids having fun with friends, the weight of their public role temporarily set aside. These moments of normalcy had become precious to them, reminders that they were still just regular girls despite everything that had happened. The scholarship ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the main stage. As the time approached, the twins felt butterflies in their stomachs. They would be speaking in front of hundreds of people, possibly the largest audience they had ever addressed. Sheriff Morrison, who would be emceeing the event, found them backstage and offered words of encouragement. He reminded them that they had already done the hardest thing by saving his life. Speaking to a friendly crowd would be easy by comparison. Mayor Richardson opened the ceremony by welcoming everyone and explaining the significance of the new scholarship program. She spoke about how tragedy had been transformed into opportunity, and how the courage of 2 young girls and their dog had inspired an entire community. The mayor's voice carried emotion as she described the donations that had poured in from across the nation. Money sent by people touched by the story and wanting to contribute to something positive. Sheriff Morrison then took the microphone, looking healthy and strong in his dress uniform. He told the audience about the morning he was found on the bridge, though he admitted his memories of it were fragmentary. He spoke about waking in the hospital to learn that two 12-year-old girls had saved his life, and how that knowledge had profoundly affected him. He said their actions had reminded him why he became a law enforcement officer, to serve and protect a community where people genuinely cared for one another. When Emma and Lily were called to the stage, the crowd rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. The twins stood together, slightly overwhelmed by the enthusiastic response, waiting for the applause to subside. Max had been allowed on stage as well, sitting proudly between them and soaking up the attention with his usual good-natured patience. Finally, the crowd settled and Emma stepped to the microphone to speak. Her voice was steady as she thanked everyone for their support over the past year. She explained that she and Lily had never sought recognition for their actions, but they were deeply grateful for how the community had embraced them. She spoke about the scholarship program, emphasizing that it represented something bigger than their individual story. It represented a commitment to service, to helping others, and to building a stronger community. She said the recipients they had chosen embodied these values perfectly. Lily then spoke, introducing each scholarship winner individually. The first recipient was Marcus Johnson, an African-American student who planned to attend nursing school and dreamed of becoming an emergency room nurse. The second was Elena Rodriguez, who wanted to study criminal justice and follow in her father's footsteps as a police officer. The third winner was Dylan Chen, who planned to train as a paramedic and join the county's emergency medical services team. Each recipient received their award certificate and a check for $5,000, along with enthusiastic applause from the audience. The three scholarship winners each gave brief acceptance speeches that were heartfelt and inspiring. Marcus talked about wanting to be present for people during their most vulnerable moments, just as the twins had been for Sheriff Morrison. Elena spoke about justice and service and how she wanted to help create a safer community for everyone. Dylan discussed the critical importance of emergency response and how every second could mean the difference between life and death, a lesson the twins' experience had dramatically illustrated. After the formal presentations concluded, the ceremony transitioned into a more casual celebration. Local musicians performed and people mingled while enjoying refreshments. Emma and Lily found themselves surrounded by well-wishers, but also by young people asking questions about their experience and seeking advice. Several children told the twins they had inspired them to learn first aid, or to think about careers helping others. These conversations were deeply meaningful to Emma and Lily, confirming that their story had created ripples far beyond that one morning. As the sun began to set and the festival wound down, the Morrison family invited Emma, Lily, and their parents to dinner at their favorite restaurant, a cozy Italian place on the edge of town. Over pasta and conversation, the two families reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. Mrs. Morrison shared that Tom's doctor had cleared him for light-duty work, a milestone they had once thought impossible. The sheriff would never be the same as before, but he had found new purpose and meaning in his altered role. Sheriff Morrison raised his glass in a toast, his voice thick with emotion. He thanked the Henderson family for the gift of life and for the ripple effects of kindness that continued to spread through their community. He said that Emma and Lily had taught him and everyone in Riverside an important lesson, that ordinary people in ordinary moments could choose to be extraordinary. He expressed hope that the scholarship program would continue to honor that lesson for generations to come. David responded with his own toast, thanking the Morrisons for their friendship and for the example they set of resilience and grace. He said that the past year had been difficult but ultimately transformative for his family, teaching them about courage, community, and the profound impact that simple acts of kindness could have. Sarah added that she was incredibly proud of her daughters, not just for their actions that morning, but for how they had handled everything that followed with humility and maturity. The dinner stretched late into the evening, filled with laughter, storytelling, and the comfortable camaraderie of people who had been through something significant together. Max slept peacefully under the table, tired from his long day of being admired and petted. The twins sat between their parents, feeling contentedly exhausted and deeply grateful for the life they had. and the people they shared it with. On the drive home, Emma and Lily watched the darkened streets of Riverside pass by the car windows. The town looked peaceful and safe, porch lights glowing warmly in the darkness. Everything appeared unchanged, yet both girls knew that their perception of their hometown had been permanently altered. Riverside wasn't just a place on a map anymore. It was a community they had served, and that had supported them in return. It was home in the deepest sense of the word. That night, as the twins prepared for bed, they talked about their hopes for the future. Emma mentioned that she had been thinking more seriously about medical school, inspired by the doctors and nurses who had saved Sheriff Morrison's life. Lily said she was leaning toward social work or counseling, wanting to help people through difficult times. Both agreed that whatever paths they chose, they wanted careers centered on service and helping others. Their experience had planted seeds that would shape their futures. Before turning off the lights, Lily retrieved the honorary deputy badges Sheriff Morrison had given them from their special box on the dresser. The medal still gleamed as brightly as it had the day they received them. The inscription on the back, "For courage and compassion," seemed even more meaningful now than it had initially. These badges represented not just one morning's actions, but an ongoing commitment to living those values every day.